Okay, welcome back again. We're continuing with the record of the orally transmitted teachings by Nico Shonin, or by Nichiren Daishonin, transmitted to Nico. Point 4 on page 57 is where we left off. So I'm going to continue at point 4. Point 4 on the words, his heart filled with regret and longing. In the passage, the father thought constantly of his son, but though he had been parted from him for over 50 years, he had never told anyone else about the matter. He merely pondered to himself, his heart filled with regret and longing. Words and Phrases, Tentai, Volume 6 says, regard refers to the father's longing, regret refers to the father. Longing, which may also mean blame, refers to the son. On the words, Volume 6 says of Tentai, the father felt regret for his failure to instruct his son properly and also reproached his son for abandoning him. The Daishonin says, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, all the various living beings in the country of Japan are comparable to the son, and Nichiren is comparable to the father. Because they fail to have faith in the Lotus Sutra, the living beings fall into the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering, but instead of blaming themselves, on the contrary, they look upon Nichiren with reproach. For his part, Nichiren has never spared his voice in urging them not to cast aside the Lotus Sutra, and so on Eagle Peak, he must have his feelings of regret for them dwelling in hell. Okay, so that is very obvious. The point that I'm trying to make is that, again, you see Nichiren talking about his own significance in regard to the latter day of the law. He doesn't just constantly go back to praising Shakyamuni or anything like that. This whole orally transmitted teaching is to reveal his true identity as the original teacher. Okay, that's up to each of you to decide, because there's, lots of different ways you can look at this. But the correct way to look at it is to always view Nichiren as the most significant teacher, because he shared with us Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which allows us to circumvent this whole long process of the Makashikan. Okay? And in the absence of his Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, it cannot be done. It's all just theory. Okay? So this is, and I have experienced in my life actual, Ichinen Senzen. So I really, really want to emphasize, listen when I'm talking. He's really talking about, he's kind of like pissed that he's not getting recognized for who he actually is, as we may all feel ourselves, okay, from time to time. So, don't let anything get you down. That's what Nichiren did. That's what the message, I think, of this point 4 actually is. It's the love and the compassion of the father for his child who's full of shit and deluded. And it's not his fault. He's just full of shit and deluded. He gets better when he gets home. All right, Volume 6 of the Words and Phrases. So Tentai says at the bottom of page 57, the words, his heart filled with regret and longing, mean that the father regrets that in the past he failed to teach and admonish his son with sufficient diligence, or to instruct him properly. Okay, or instruct him properly, so that as a result, the son ran away. Okay? And he reproaches his son for forgetting the obligations he owes to his parents and spurning his father and becoming intimate with others. Point 5, because the son had left and not kept in touch with his family and did not realize that this very rich guy was actually his dad. Okay, and that he was actually the inheritance person for his great wealth. Point 5, on the words, the cluster, he ended up working for his dad for a long time, again, without knowing the actuality of his identity as his son. It's a great parable. Point 5, on the words, this cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. In the passage, we today have heard the Buddha's voice teaching, and we dance for joy, having gained what we never had before. The Buddha declares that the voice hearers will be able to attain Buddhahood. This cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. In other words, they've gotten a prophecy of Buddhahood without actually having felt that they did something significant to make themselves worthy of that. And the reality is that they are already worthy because all living beings are born of the three bodies eternally. Eternal three bodies, okay? So that's always the case with everyone. We don't ever see our actual true entity until later in life when we gain the wisdom to be able to perceive it. So continuing, the record of the orally transmitted teaching, says Nichiren, goes right into this. The word unsurpassed has various different levels of meaning. From the point of view of the non-Buddhist doctrines, the Tripitaka teaching of Buddhism is unsurpassed, the Agama Sutras, okay? Whereas the non-Buddhist doctrines have that which surpasses them. Again, the Tripitaka teachings has with that which surpasses it, while the connecting teaching is in comparison unsurpassed. The connecting teaching in turn has that which surpasses it, while the specific teaching is unsurpassed. The specific teaching has that which surpasses it, while the perfect teaching is unsurpassed. Again, the perfect teaching of the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra has that which surpasses it, while the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra is unsurpassed. There is no teaching greater. It's at the end of the line. That's why it's called the perfect. It's perfect and full. It includes everything, including all of the previous teachings. There's no need for the other teachings as long as the lotus is in the loop and you're aware of its profundity. Okay? So he says, again, the perfect teaching of the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra has that which surpasses it, while the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra is unsurpassed. Again, the perfect teaching of the theoretical teaching section of the Lotus Sutra has that which surpasses it, while the perfect teaching of the essential teaching section is unsurpassed. Again, the other 13 chapters of the theoretical teaching have that which surpasses them, while the expedient means chapter is unsurpassed. Again, the other 13 chapters of the essential teaching have that which surpasses them, while the one chapter in the two halves are unsurpassed. The last half of the 15th, the 16th, and the first half of the 17th. While the one chapter in the two halves are unsurpassed. Again, that's the core of Shakyamuni's Lotus Sutra. Again, among the teachings put forth by the great teacher Tentai, great consonant insight, the Makashikan, great concentration and insight is unsurpassed, while the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra and words and phrases have that which surpasses them, the Makashikan itself. And so some of those two bodies of work, the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra and words and phrases, are preliminary to the Makashikan, where he gets into the heaviest of heavy. He's gone deep, deeper, and now deepest. This is what the Daishonin does constantly with us. This teaching is deepest. Okay, this record of the orally transmitted teachings is deepest. Okay, it is. Pardon me. And now, in the minds of Nichiren and his followers, what is unsurpassed is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Among all the things that are unsurpassed, it holds the highest position of all. So there is nothing that surpasses Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is the wonderful law that is described in the passage above as a cluster of unsurpassed jewels. A cluster of jewels that represents all the paramitas, the 10,000 religious practices, and the 10,000 good deeds of all the Buddhas of the three existences of past, present, and future. They're all omnipresent in the light of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, they're all contained within the Daimoku. and without labor or trouble, this is the whole mercy and compassion of the latter day and the true Buddha. Without labor or trouble, without religious practices or good deeds, we don't have to live up to anybody else's standards. This cluster of unsurpassed jewels can come into our possession through the single word faith, because I don't care how you practice or where you practice. If you don't practice with faith, you will not see the result of the teaching, period. Okay? That is why the passage says that it has come to us. It has come to us unsought because we've made the cause for it to appear in our lives. It is actually the jewel that is already contained within our life. The word ji in the phrase jitoku, come to us of itself, refers to the 10 worlds. That is, the cluster comes into the possession of each and every one in the 10 worlds. This is what is known as the true aspect of all phenomena. In other words, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the base component of all things that exist in the phenomenal realm, both sentient and insentient, throughout time without beginning, through the present, through time into the future without end. Point 6 on 59. On the great mercy of the world-honored one in the passage, the world-honored one in his great mercy makes use of a rare thing, in pity and compassion, teaching and converting, bringing benefit to us. In numberless millions of kalpas, who could ever repay him? Okay, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, Nichiren says, the world-honored one is Shakyamuni Buddha. The great mercy is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The great mercy is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. If we wish to repay the great mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha, we should accept and uphold the Lotus Sutra. This is the way to acknowledge the mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha, which got us this far until the 500-year period when I came along and introduced the great pure law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So he's qualifying, without being dismissive towards Shakyamuni at all, when the age changes and the circumstances that are within the teachings represent the fact that there will be alternatives that are superior, and they're made available only at a specific time in the future, you don't dismiss what's preceded it. Because the only reason we get to the latter day of the law and to Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and to Nichiren Daishonin studying at Seichochi from the time he was 16 and studying at Nara and mastering all the sutras of the provisional and trace teachings, none of that would have happened or been able to happen in the absence of these efforts of these people that precede us in the latter day. We're in the latter day. We're the ones that, without having to do as much as they did, were able to grasp the true essence of life through Nam-myoho Renge Kyo alone. That's our great good fortune. We don't have to do what Shakyamuni's disciples had to do. However, without Shakyamuni and his disciples and those teachings, Buddhism itself would have not continued to exist long enough for Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to manifest. And therefore, we don't disavow or disregard anything, because we view life as everything is connected through the past, the present, and the future. So it's pretty much all encompassing, and that's what the Daishonin is saying here straight up about who could ever repay him, referring to Shakyamuni. And the record of the orally transmitted teaching says the world-honored one they're talking about in this sutra is Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay? The great mercy is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, that which has not been revealed but has now been revealed in the latter day of the law. If we wish to repay the great mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha for putting all this in motion, we should accept and uphold the Lotus Sutra, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo in the latter day of the law, correct? This sutra means Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. This is the way to acknowledge the mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha. So he says, rather than worshiping Shakyamuni Buddha as some external deity that's some sort of, I don't know how you view him, but something outside of yourself. View Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as a direct extension of his original efforts and not in conflict with it at all, any of his teachings at all, and that this is the great opening the door. Now, entering is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, opening the door is to show you to the door of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and that's essentially what all the preceding sutras have done. All right, so the reason the great mercy is taken to mean the daimoku is explained in the words that follow, namely, make use of a rare thing. The rare thing is the daimoku, which is only known in the latter day of the law and only by the disciples of Nichiren himself. For more than 40 years, this great mercy, the Lotus Sutra, all 28 chapters of it, was kept secret. What was hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter never came out with all of those learned, capable people, including Shakyamuni. All right, and then in the 8 years that followed, the great mercy was set forth and revealed. So let's see, what was the timeline? For more than 40 years. Okay, and then the 8 years are the last 8 years of his preaching life. He's talking about Shakyamuni's right there. Okay, he's talking about the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra were preached in the Nirvana was in a single night before he died. Okay. The Lotus Sutra took 8 years. Okay, the Lotus Sutra took 8 years for that process of those 28 chapters to occur and be preached. Okay, so that was a long, was a long meeting. That was a long assembly. Okay, so let me read again. The bottom of page 59. The reason the great mercy is taken to mean the daimoku, the basis of the validity of this comprehension that is being expressed here, is explained in the words that follow, namely, make use of a rare thing. The rare thing is the daimoku, because it's only come from me. That's how rare it is. For more than 40 years, this great mercy, the Lotus Sutra, was kept secret. This great mercy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the latter day was kept secret. And then in the 8 years that followed, so at the end of Shakyamuni's teaching life, the great mercy was set forth and revealed in the latter day of the law. Volume 1 of Words and Phrases says, the Dharma King reveals the way the people should follow. The way is the great mercy of the Lotus Sutra, the compassion to show all people that they have the Buddha nature innately within them. Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thinking in that way to save all the living beings of the country of Japan, is this not an example of the great mercy of the world-honored one? Because when we devote our lives to Kosen Rufu, Shakyamuni got nothing on us, okay? Because what we're doing is going to last for 10,000 years and beyond. It's the predication for those 10,000 years and beyond. It's not preparatory like a former or a middle day, okay? So that's why the Daishonin is making this whole point constantly. You should understand who really initiates all of this. Is all possible, frankly, only because of me. And he's not saying that arrogantly. He's qualifying blow by blow by blow why that is a fact. And that fact leaves us with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the latter day of the law as a result. And we should have no doubts about that. Okay? So follow his teaching now. All right? The great teacher, Chang'an, who was Tentai's disciple, distinguishes 10 different types of mercy bestowed by the Buddha. First is the mercy represented by a compassion that embraces all living beings. Second is the mercy of the very first sowing of the seed of Buddhahood. Third is the mercy of the various appearances of the Buddhas in the interval that followed. Fourth is the mercy of concealing his value and appearing as though inferior. 5th is the mercy of the preaching of the lesser vehicle in Deer Park. 6 is the mercy of leading the disciples to spurn the lesser vehicle and long for the great vehicle, Mahayana. 7th is the mercy of the rich farmer causing his son to manage his household affairs, the parable that we were just referring to. 8th is the mercy of the father awakening his son to his true relationship to the Father. 9th is the mercy of giving a wonderful feeling of peace and security. 10th is the mercy of being able to utilize what one has gained to benefit others. These 10 types. So the 10th is the most important one. How do you be the Buddha in your present form? That can only happen by you propagating the law through your understanding of the teaching. These 10 types of mercy correspond to the 3 analogies of the robe, the seat, and the room of the thus come one. That is the 3 rules of preaching. See point 7 of chapter 10, Teacher of the Law. We'll be getting to that. And I'll remember. Point 6 on the words and phrases says, the seeds planted long ago are beginning to sprout a little, but they have not yet unfolded and attained the stage of flowering. So what means would they have to repay the mercy shown to them so long ago? It also says, the commentator says that things do not reply to heaven and earth for the fact of their existence, as a child does not give thanks to his father and mother for the fact of his birth. It is because they lack a sense of obligation to repay their debt they owe. Commenting on this, the supplement to the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra says, things do not reply to heaven and earth. By the way, this is Tao Xian. Is the author of this work. Commenting on this, the supplement to the words and phrases of Lotus Sutra, Volume 6 says, things do not reply to heaven and earth for the fact of their existence. Means that although things come into being through the agency of heaven and earth, they do not attempt to repay the kindness of heaven and earth. The same applies in the case of the child. On the words and phrases, Myola, Volume 6 says, how could it be simply that because they lack a sense of obligation how could it be simply because they lack a sense of obligation to repay? Rather, it is the mercy. It is that this mercy is such that it cannot be repaid. Rather, that it is this mercy that cannot be repaid. Okay, commenting on this supplement to the words and phrases says, how could it be simply because they lack a sense of obligation to repay? Means that the thus come one has given the voice here disciples something that in principle is incapable of being repaid. It's Buddhahood. Okay, what he has given them in principle is the one great nirvana. Okay, it's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says thus, although the commentaries offer various different interpretations, in the end, the great mercy refers to the sowing of the seeds of Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So he's saying, no, regardless of how they viewed it, in reality, it comes down to, again, if it's Buddhahood, it's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. All Buddhas achieve Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, including all the people that are mentioned in the first 14 chapters prior to the emerging from the earth chapter. Okay, so the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, thus, although the commentators offer various different interpretations, in the end, the great mercy refers to the sowing of the seeds of Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Because of this mercy of sowing of the seeds, all other kinds of mercy follow just as shadows follow a form. And now Nichiren too dispenses this kind of mercy. In presenting the Lotus Sutra to all living beings of the country of Japan, and when he says Lotus, in presenting this Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to all the living beings of the country of Japan, he is bestowing upon them the 10 kinds of mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha. Is he not? So he's saying once again about himself as he relates to the latter day of the law and this teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in relationship to a teaching that is a past teaching. All right? As we have seen, these 10 types of mercy correspond to the 3 analogies of the robe, the seed, and the room of the thus come one. The first, the second, and the third types correspond to the mercy of the room, that is great pity. The fourth, fifth, and sixth, and seventh types correspond to the mercy of the robe, that is gentle and forbearing. And the eighth, ninth, and 10th types correspond to the seat, that is the emptiness of all phenomena. So what is the seat that is the emptiness of all phenomena? It's the original state. Okay, so it is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, with regard, at the bottom of page 61, with regard to the 6th type, the mercy of leading the disciples to spurn the lesser vehicle and long for the great vehicle. Volume 6 of On Words and Phrases says, therefore, after preaching the sudden teaching, the Buddha sets forth the doctrines of the lesser vehicle. Then purging and washing clean his disciples, he refines, pounds them into shape as though with hammers and mallets. And again, this is the whole process of going through those other phases of the teachings. Great vehicle, lesser vehicle. Hang on. Here they are. The correct and equal, the Wisdom Sutras, the Tripitaka Sutras, and the Perfect Teaching. That's the 4. Okay, there we go. The Lotus and the Nirvana. Okay, so now we get to volume 5. We doing fine on time? Okay, keep going. Chapter 5, the parable of the medicinal herbs. 5 important points on page 62. Point 1, concerning the parable of the medicinal herbs chapter. On the Words and Phrases volume 7 says the inborn Buddha nature that is without beginning or end. The inborn, okay, so that's your eternal 3 bodies, okay? The inborn body, Buddha nature that is without beginning or end is comparable to the earth, and arousing the heart and mind of seeking the great vehicle, Mahayana, is compared to the seeds, or Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which is the king of of Mahayana. Arousing the heart and mind of seeking the 2 vehicles of voice hearers and Pakyeka Buddhas is comparable to the sprouts and stalks of the plant. After that, when one enters the first stage of security and arouses the aspiration for Buddhahood, this is comparable to developing in a similar fashion the sprouts and stalks of the Buddha vehicle. The record of the orally transmitted, so this was Tentai. Record of the orally transmitted teaching says, Nichiren says, belief in the heart of the Lotus Sutra is the seeds. So belief in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the seeds. And when one enters the enlightenment of the true aspect of all phenomena, the enlightenment of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, then one achieves the fruit of Buddhahood. Okay? Medicine represents the mind of the living beings in the 9 worlds. The mind that is devoted to the provisional teachings is comparable to a poison plant. But when one encounters the Lotus Sutra, then the mind ground of the earthly desires that is beset by the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness is planted with the seeds of the complete enjoyment of the 3 bodies of the Buddha. And the awakening to this fact is what is meant by medicine. So our stage 6, okay. Now Nichiren and his followers, our stage 6 of attaining this realization is the medicine. Now Nichiren and his followers apply this medicine of the wonderful law to the plants of earthly desires. This is in effect a way of saying in parable form that earthly desires are enlightenment and that the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana. A commentary, volume 5 of Words and Phrases says, a parable is that which enlightens and instructs. Thus, the parable of the medicinal herbs is in fact about us, we who are votaries of the Lotus Sutra. and chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in the latter day of the law. We'll continue with point 2 on page 63 in the next video. Thank you very much.